It's not personal, Crystal. You're just not smart enough for this position. Those words rang out across the conference room before I even had a chance to sit down. I froze, half expecting my boss, Kenton Hughes, to laugh and say he was joking. Instead, he looked at me with a dismissive smirk. Our entire team was there. 10 colleagues I'd worked alongside for years, all exchanging nervous glances. I felt the heat rush to my cheeks. It wasn't only the insult that stung. It was how he'd said it so publicly, as if my humiliation was a side effect of a necessary announcement. I had come to this meeting excited, expecting it to be the formal reveal of who would be promoted to senior account executive. After 5 years of consistent results and months of hints, I'd been almost certain the promotion was mine. I'd spent the entire weekend preparing a speech and practicing how I'd humbly accept the role. But Kenton crushed those hopes in seconds. He leaned back in his chair, scanning me from head to toe. "We need the brightest star in that seat, Crystal," he said casually. "And you're just not it." That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with mere oversight. Kenton wasn't clueless. He was intentional. The rest of the meeting blurred. Someone muttered a half-hearted condolence. Another person coughed awkwardly. My eyes stung, but I refused to let myself tear up in front of them. I just kept seeing Kenton's smug grin, hearing the echo of his words. "You're just not smart enough." As soon as we were dismissed, I bolted. With everyone's eyes on me, I slipped into the hallway. Each footstep felt heavier than the last, like I was dragging my pride behind me. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass partition. My cheeks were still flushed, and my lipstick was smudged from where I'd been biting my lip. I felt embarrassment and anger swirl inside me, each fueling the other. Over the past 5 years, I'd broken sales records, turned dismal accounts around, and built strong client relationships that brought in half of the region's revenue. Yet none of that seemed to matter. It wasn't even the fact that I didn't get the promotion. It was the way Kenton delivered his verdict. So offhandedly, as if my professional worth was an afterthought. Worse still was the knowledge that, behind closed doors, he'd probably belittle me again. But shame soon morphed into a simmering rage. I decided right then I'd show him just how stupid I really was. That evening, I found myself at home staring blankly at my laptop, half a glass of wine untouched on the table. My roommate Sonia peeked her head into the living room. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and told her everything. How Kenton had dismissed me in front of the entire team. How this pattern wasn't new. He'd frequently made me do the grunt work while handing the credit to others. How it felt like an ongoing campaign to undermine my accomplishments. Her brow furrowed. "That's not a boss. That's a bully," she said decisively. "You've done more for that company than half of them combined." Something in her unwavering tone pulled at me. Sonia worked as a freelance consultant, and she always believed in data, in facts, in quantifiable results. She gave me a long look. "Think about it. You can't keep letting him treat you like that. You've got the numbers, the success stories, the track record. Someone will value you." I didn't tell her my deeper thought. I wanted more than just an escape. I wanted to prove to everyone, especially Kenton, that I was worth more than any position he'd dangle. But a tiny, dangerous seed of determination took root in my mind that night. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my gut. A new idea had nestled in my mind. If Kenton wouldn't see my worth, maybe I'd make sure the entire industry did. Before heading to the office, I reviewed my performance stats. 6 major clients retained and expanded over the past year, a sales figure that beat the rest of the team by 25%, plus dozens of smaller achievements. It was a straightforward reminder of what I'd contributed. When I arrived at work, I could feel the awkwardness. My coworkers avoided my eyes, probably unsure whether to console me or maintain distance. Word travels fast, and I knew they'd all heard the humiliating line about my intellect. I gave them a polite nod, forging ahead to my desk. I spent the morning revisiting old opportunities I'd identified, ideas I'd pitched to Kenton, but that were never pursued. If I couldn't get the official promotion, I'd find ways to get recognition from higher-ups, or possibly other departments. I had no illusions. A direct confrontation might backfire if I had no leverage. But I could build leverage. Quietly, systematically, I gather proof that Kenton's leadership was overshadowing real talents and that I was the biggest one he'd overlooked. Just after lunch, as I browsed spreadsheets of client data, Brandon from IT strolled by my cubicle. He was the kind of guy who was friendly to everyone, but he rarely engaged in office drama. He cleared his throat. "Heard about the meeting yesterday," he said cautiously. "Sorry that went down like that." I forced a shrug, pretending indifference. "It is what it is." He nodded, but his gaze lingered. "Look, you've always been cool to me. If there's anything you need, any data or reports that might help, let me know." I raised an eyebrow. Normally, IT staff are extremely protective of the company's internal systems. They don't just offer special help. "Why would you do that?" I asked. Brandon glanced around, making sure no one was within earshot. "Kenton and let's just say we've clashed over budgets and hardware upgrades. He's cheap, but also quick to blame. He's tried to pin server downtime on me more than once. I figure if someone's gonna set him straight, it might be you." An unexpected surge of gratitude filled me. I realized that Kenton's toxic behavior extended far beyond me. He'd alienated others too. Maybe I wasn't so alone in wanting to change the status quo. With Brandon's discreet offer, I had a potential gateway. After hours, I headed to the IT department's deserted corner. Brandon was there, sleeves rolled up, finishing a software update. He nodded at me. "You said you wanted to see a bigger picture of the company's performance and Kenton's dealings?" I leaned over his shoulder as he typed. Within moments, a sea of analytics data appeared on his screen. Sales numbers, project timelines, budgets, expenses. It was mesmerizing how everything was neatly cataloged in the company's system. He pointed to certain lines. "Notice anything interesting?" I squinted at the screen. Some department expenses under Kenton's watch were disproportionately high. Team-building lunches that cost thousands more than expected, special consulting fees paid out monthly. The figures didn't match standard departmental spending. My pulse quickened. "Those are red flags," I murmured. "Why is a sales manager racking up that many consult fees?" Brandon nodded. "I can't say for sure if it's shady, but it's definitely unusual." I copied the relevant data, saving it securely onto a flash drive. Deep down, I was sure Kenton was cutting corners or funneling budget in ways that raised serious ethical questions. This might be the leverage I needed, or it might be the beginning of a bigger storm. Armed with suspicious expense records, I decided to test the waters. The next morning, I waited until Kenton strolled in, wearing his usual expression of smug self-importance. "Hey, I've been reviewing our departmental spend," I said brightly, stepping into his office uninvited. "Wanted to get your insights on a few things." Kenton looked up, unimpressed. "You're not in finance, Crystal. Why are you looking at budgets?" I offered my best innocent smile. "Just being proactive. The best teams share knowledge, right?" For a moment, he narrowed his eyes. "Proactive, huh? You sure you can handle numbers, given yesterday's conversation?" He laughed, a sharp bark. I ignored the jab. Instead, I held up one of the questionable expense lines. I noticed a series of consulting charges under marketing enhancements that total nearly $45,000 last quarter alone. "Could you clarify what those were for?" Kenton's face froze. It was the smallest flicker, a microsecond. Then he recovered, sneering at me. "That's confidential. I don't owe you an explanation. Now get back to your desk." I stood there for a beat, registering the undercurrent of panic in his eyes. He hid it behind bravado, but I'd seen it. And that told me everything. Whatever was on those records, he did not want me looking deeper. Kenton's threat was clear. Keep snooping, and I'd be risking my job. But if I backed off, I'd be stuck in the same cycle of humiliation. That afternoon, I scheduled a quick coffee with Anita, our senior HR manager. Anita was professional to a fault. She listened calmly as I described the promotional fiasco and how Kenton had publicly embarrassed me. Her expression gave little away. "The company has a zero-tolerance policy for harassment," she said. I forced a polite smile. "That's good to know. But as for corporate spending questions," she continued, "if you suspect wrongdoing, you can file an internal report. However, that process might involve direct confrontation with your department head." Meaning, going official could blow up in my face if I didn't have bulletproof proof. I thanked Anita and left, more determined than ever. I realized that if I tried to topple Kenton too soon, he could weasel his way out. If I was going to bring him down, I needed a thorough approach. I already had an inkling. Kenton was dabbling in something shady. My instincts rarely failed me. The question was, how far would I have to go to expose it? That evening, while the rest of the office emptied out, I settled at my desk with a quiet resolve. The overhead lights hummed softly, and the city skyline blinked through the window. I pulled out the flash drive from Brandon. It contained more than just expense accounts. There were email chains about marketing enhancements. One recurring name popped up, Orion Consulting, the same consulting fee line that had racked up $45,000 in a single quarter. I searched our files. There was no official contract with Orion Consulting, no mention of them in any official proposals or project rosters. But I did see scattered references to Orion expansions, each time authorized by Kenton. My mind spun with possibilities. Shell company? Kickback scheme? Embezzlement? If Orion wasn't a real vendor delivering real services, then who was pocketing the money? A wave of adrenaline hit me. This wasn't just about a petty boss who insulted me. If I could prove criminal or unethical behavior, I wouldn't just be getting him reprimanded. I could see him out of the company, and that might crack the door open for me to rise, even to the point of taking his job. The next day, I approached Brandon again. "Ever heard of Orion Consulting in the system?" I asked, keeping my tone low. He tilted his head. "Orion? No official user account. Might be external, but if it was a legitimate partner, there should be a vendor record. Let me see if I can track invoice references." Within minutes, Brandon confirmed. No formal invoices from Orion in the official system. Yet the budgeting lines showed money flowing to them monthly. "I can try to dig deeper," he offered, "but I've got to be careful. If Kenton catches wind, I could lose my job." A pang of guilt stung me. Brandon was risking a lot to help. "I won't let that happen, I promise." As I stepped away, I bumped into Martin, an older coworker who'd seen the company through multiple leadership changes. He gave me a sympathetic half-smile. "I heard about the promotion fiasco. Don't let him get to you, kid." I forced a grin. "I'm all right." I wondered if Martin suspected the scope of what was going on. Probably not. But soon, everyone might know. And if my hunch was right, revealing the truth would shake the entire department. On my lunch break, I ventured off-site to a small cafe around the corner. Mid-sandwich, I noticed a familiar face slip into a booth near the window. Kenton's executive assistant, Amanda. She didn't see me at first. She was too busy rummaging through her bag, pulling out a stack of documents. But curiosity piqued. I took my coffee and moved to a nearby table. If she was discussing something sensitive with a colleague, maybe I'd catch a clue. Soon, another figure joined her, a lean man in a gray suit. They whispered back and forth, the man pointing at the papers. I craned my neck, straining to hear. Most was inaudible, but a few words stuck out. Orion, invoice trail, and no official record. My pulse spiked. Could Amanda be in on the scheme? Or was she unraveling it, just like me? As I sipped my coffee, I realized Amanda's expression was anxious, worried. She tapped her pen on the table, murmuring, "He told me to keep it under wraps, but it's starting to look suspicious." The man nodded slowly. "We can't let the higher-ups find out yet, unless we're prepared for the fallout." I didn't catch the rest because a waiter passed between us. By the time I looked back, they were gathering their things. My heart thudded. Amanda suspected something too. Chapter 12. The Revelation. By late afternoon, Brandon messaged me, "Got something big. Meet me at the back stairwell." I hurried over. Brandon waited in the dimly lit landing, holding a printout. I found an old invoice from Orion. It was processed under a different department's cost center. The invoice references a marketing project code that doesn't exist. He handed me the paper. The date on it was from 8 months ago. The total was $12,500, and it was signed by none other than Kenton himself. Thing is, the signature is on a separate layer from the invoice text, like it was digitally added later. My stomach churned. He's forging company documents? Brandon nodded grimly. Looks that way. Possibly funneling money out under a fake vendor. If that's the case, it's serious fraud. Serious indeed. This was no longer an office rivalry or incompetent leadership. It was potential embezzlement, punishable by law. My mind raced with the implications. If I took this to HR or legal, it might trigger an internal investigation. Or Kenton might panic and cover his tracks, scapegoating me or Brandon. But if I built a watertight case, I could dethrone him and prove my own value in one fell swoop. That evening, I called Sonia on my drive home. Her quick exhale told me she was bracing for another whirlwind update. Embezzlement, she repeated, voice full of shock. Are you sure? Not 100%, but the signs are strong, I said, pulling into our driveway. I have half a mind to blow this wide open, but I need a plan so I don't become collateral damage. Sonia, ever the strategist, suggested we lay out a step-by-step approach. 1. Secure all evidence, emails, invoices, transaction logs. 2. Identify any potential allies in higher positions, people who would take my findings seriously. 3. Prepare a personal safety net, just in case the blowback jeopardizes my job. After dinner, I typed a case file document on my laptop, detailing every suspicious item. Then I wrote down the names of senior executives who might champion me if I presented unimpeachable evidence. I was playing with fire. If Kenton realized what I was up to before I was ready, my entire career could end. But if I waited too long, he might bury the evidence or turn it against me. This was a knife's edge, but I was determined to see it through. 2 days later, as I was leaving the office, a woman in a sharp black suit approached me in the lobby. I recognized her. Lucy Morales, one of the company's legal advisors. She rarely mingled with ordinary staff. She slid on a polite smile. Crystal, right? I nodded warily. Yes, Miss Morales. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. I'm aware of certain rumors, things about financial irregularities in your department, rumors that you might be investigating them. My heart lurched. How had she heard? Did Kenton suspect me already? Lucy continued, whatever you're doing, tread carefully. I'm not your enemy, but I can't protect you if you break protocol. The company's whistleblower policy only applies if you go through official channels at the right time. I swallowed. Meaning if I jump the gun and accuse him publicly without a formal procedure, I'm on my own? She gave a curt nod. And if your allegations don't hold up, you could be sued for defamation. If you gather info illegally, that's also a problem. I forced myself to breathe. Thank you. I appreciate the warning. She turned to leave, then paused. Kenton has powerful friends. Make sure your case is unassailable before you move, or he'll bury you. Her words echoed in my mind as I walked out into the night. The next morning, I decided to talk to Amanda, Kenton's assistant. After overhearing her at the cafe, I suspected she knew more than she was letting on. Catching her alone wasn't easy, but I managed to corner her by the coffee machine before the daily rush. Amanda, I said softly, we need to talk. I know about Orion Consulting, and I heard you discussing invoice trails with that man in the cafe. Her eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. You're mistaken. I shook my head. No, I'm not. You don't have to protect him. If he's doing something illegal, you could end up implicated. Amanda swallowed, glancing around. You don't understand. Kenton forces me to sign off on these invoices. He said it's for advanced marketing strategies and outside specialists. But the numbers never added up. I started making copies, just in case. I exhaled in relief. So you have records? She nodded hesitantly. Yes, but they're in his locked filing cabinet. I have backup scans on a USB. If he finds out I kept them, he'll fire me, or worse. Gently, I touched her arm. We can protect each other if we do this carefully. She stared at me for a long moment. Then her shoulders slumped, acceptance in her eyes. I'll show you what I have. Late that night, the office corridors were silent. Amanda led me to Kenton's personal office. She had a spare key, an advantage of being his assistant. Inside, we flicked on a small desk lamp, carefully avoiding security cameras. Amanda tugged open a bottom drawer, revealing a set of neatly labeled files. What you see here are the physical copies of the Orion invoices, she whispered. His signature is on all of them, but I swear he typed up these charges himself. I flipped through them, each invoice listing inflated services like brand consultation and digital outreach. The amounts varied, but collectively, they were in the hundreds of thousands over the past year. Amanda handed me a USB drive, scanned everything. Emails, memos, it's all in here. My chest tightened. This was dynamite. With these documents, it was no longer just a suspicion or a faint anomaly, it was glaring proof of financial misconduct. We locked up quickly, hearts pounding. As we stepped into the hallway, Amanda's voice trembled. We can't hide this for long. When do we make a move? I gripped the USB. Soon, I promised. I'll coordinate with someone at legal or HR. Then we'll bring this forward officially. Little did we know, events would force our hands sooner than we anticipated. The very next morning, I was at my desk, sorting through the data Amanda had given me, when I caught a glimpse of Kenton storming across the office floor. His usually controlled demeanor was replaced by fury. He headed straight for Amanda's desk. Though I was too far to hear, I saw him slam a folder onto her keyboard, leaning in aggressively. Amanda's face paled, and she glanced nervously in my direction. Kenton tracked her gaze, then looked right at me. A chill ran down my spine. Without warning, he marched over. "Crystal, you and I need to talk. Now," he snarled. He strode to the nearest empty conference room, leaving me no choice but to follow. Once inside, he slammed the door. "Why were you in my office last night?" he demanded. I maintained a calm front. "I have no idea what you're talking about." He slammed his palm on the table. "Don't lie to me. Someone saw two figures in my office on security cameras around midnight." My heart thudded. We'd overlooked the building's security feed. "I was working late." "You're paranoid," I replied, trying to keep my tone dismissive. Kenton scoffed. "You better not be snooping through my files. You think you're clever, huh? Maybe I should call HR and recommend they terminate you for unauthorized access." I folded my arms. "Go ahead, but that won't end well for you." His eyes flickered with rage. "Is that a threat?" He expected fear. Instead, I stared him down. "Call it a promise." After that confrontation, I realized time was running out. Kenton's anger confirmed he knew something was off. Any day now, he might fabricate a reason to fire me or destroy the evidence. I quickly emailed Lucy Morales, the legal advisor who'd warned me earlier. My message was cryptic but urgent. "We should meet about the issue we discussed. I have conclusive proof now." An hour later, Lucy replied with a single line. "Come to my office at 6 p.m. after everyone leaves." Perfect. Next, I found Amanda in the break room, pale and on edge. "He's threatened to audit my computer," she whispered. "He wants to see if I've been forwarding documents." "Don't worry," I said, forcing confidence. "We'll talk to Lucy after hours. You have the USB drive with you, right?" Amanda nodded, patting her purse. "It's right here." Before heading back to my desk, I paused. "Thank you for trusting me. Once this is over, we'll be free." She offered a shaky smile. "Let's hope so, because if it fails, he'll ruin us both." Her words echoed my own fears, but backing down wasn't an option. We had the truth on our side, and a plan to reveal it. At 6 p.m., Lucy's office was almost pitch dark, save for a small desk lamp. She locked the door behind Amanda and me, gesturing for us to sit. "All right, show me," Lucy said quietly, and I passed over the USB. We watched as Lucy opened file after file, scanned invoices, email threads referencing Orion Consulting, bank statements that matched suspicious sums. She whistled low under her breath. "That's a lot of money unaccounted for." Amanda explained how Kenton coerced her into processing these consulting fees, forging quotes and project codes. Lucy listened intently, occasionally scribbling notes. When we finished, Lucy rubbed her temple. "This is big. If validated, it's clear embezzlement. The next step is an internal compliance investigation, which I can escalate, but you need to be prepared for blowback. Kenton might fight dirty, call in favors, or try to spin the narrative." I nodded firmly. "We understand, but we also want to ensure that Amanda isn't scapegoated. He forced her into this." Lucy tapped her pen against the desk. "With enough proof, we can protect her under whistleblower guidelines. You too, Crystal. But if Kenton gets wind before we formalize the process, all bets are off." A hush fell over the room, each of us realizing the magnitude. We were about to light a fuse on an explosive scandal, and there was no going back. The very next morning, Lucy filed the official complaint with the compliance department. They launched an immediate audit, seizing relevant documents, freezing suspicious accounts, and questioning Kenton. The office buzzed with tension. People sensed something seismic was happening, but few knew the details. By noon, it was everywhere. Whispers that Kenton was under investigation for financial misconduct. Department heads received urgent emails scheduling review sessions. Amanda and I stayed low, waiting for the official call to give our statements. Shortly after lunch, we were both summoned. A stern-faced compliance officer named Mr. Dupree greeted us in a small conference room. He recorded everything, flipping through the printed copies Lucy had provided. "You two collaborated on this discovery?" he asked. Amanda glanced at me, then nodded. Yes, I was coerced into preparing false documentation. Crystal pieced it together. Dupree studied the invoices. Do you know who else might be involved? Amanda shook her head. I just know Kenton authorized them. Dupree's brow furrowed. This is substantial. Our next steps are to suspend Kenton pending a deeper investigation. Amanda's eyes widened. I suppressed a surge of relief. We were so close to toppling his reign. Yet I also felt a quiver of anxiety. We'd forced Kenton into a corner, and cornered predators lash out. The confrontation arrived faster than expected. At 4 p.m., the entire sales department was called into the large conference room. Kenton stood at the front, flanked by an executive from corporate named Miss Thorpe. Miss Thorpe wore a stern expression. As many of you know, there are allegations of misconduct involving departmental funds, she said. Mr. Hughes has been asked to address this. Kenton cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the room. Then they locked onto me. There are vile rumors spreading about me, accusations of fraud. I want you all to know that I've done nothing wrong. He paused dramatically. These allegations come from a disgruntled employee who's trying to sabotage me for personal gain. Crystal, if you have any decency, you'll retract your lies. A wave of gasps rippled through the room. My cheeks grew hot with anger. He was publicly calling me out, labeling me a liar. Miss Thorpe stepped forward. Kenton, we've begun an audit. We'll let the process determine the truth. But Kenton wouldn't stop. I have evidence that Crystal has been snooping in confidential files, forging documents, and framing me. She's always wanted a promotion, and now she's stooping to sabotage to get it. My heart pounded. His brazen tactic was to accuse me of exactly what he had done. If I couldn't refute it, he might muddy the waters enough to save himself. I felt everyone's eyes on me. My pulse hammered. This was a showdown in front of the entire department. Kenton was trying to paint me as the manipulative villain. I stood slowly, inhaling to steady myself. If anyone needs proof, I said, the compliance team has copies of every invoice bearing Kenton's signature, some of which were processed on non-existent project codes. I have no reason to forge anything. I simply followed the data. Kenton snorted. You forged my signature. Amanda, trembling beside me, raised her hand. That's not true. I witnessed him sign many of these, and I have emails from him instructing me to process Orion payments. A hush fell. Miss Thorpe frowned. Let's keep this professional. An internal review is underway. By week's end, we'll have clarity on who is responsible. But the department had heard enough. The tension in the room hung thick. Some employees looked shocked, others suspicious of Kenton's meltdown. I met his glare with an unwavering gaze, refusing to be cowed. Right then, I sensed the tide shifting. Kenton's smear tactic was backfiring. He had lost his composure, and the more he shouted, the guiltier he appeared. 2 days of intense investigation followed. Compliance poured through documents, interviewed staff, and double-checked every questionable transaction. Kenton was notably absent, placed on leave. Amanda and I performed our duties amid hushed stares, waiting for the hammer to drop. On Friday afternoon, Lucy Morales approached me, looking triumphant. They're announcing the decision in 20 minutes in the main conference room. My nerves fluttered. Did they believe me, or had Kenton's lies sown enough doubt to risk my termination? We gathered again, this time with a top-level executive, Mr. Kawaguchi, presiding. He cleared his throat. After thorough review, we found conclusive evidence that Mr. Hughes engaged in fraudulent activity by funneling company funds to a fabricated consulting entity. He's been terminated, effective immediately. A collective gasp spread among my coworkers. They turned to me, relief and respect shining on their faces. Mr. Kawaguchi continued, We'd like to commend Crystal Reed for bringing these issues to light. Without her vigilance, this misconduct could have continued indefinitely. Going forward, we'll be seeking a new manager for the sales department. A hush followed. My pulse soared. Had I actually done it? Freed us from Kenton's reign and positioned myself for his job? I caught Lucy's eye. She gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. 1 week later, Mr. Kawaguchi summoned me to his office, a sleek corner room with wide windows overlooking the city. I stepped inside, heart thumping. Crystal, he began, folding his hands on the desk. You've demonstrated not only strong results in sales, but also ethical fortitude and leadership qualities. I blinked, recalling how a few weeks ago Kenton had ridiculed me in a conference room, calling me too stupid. How quickly fortunes can turn, Mr. Kawaguchi continued. I'm offering you the position of acting sales director, effective immediately. If performance remains strong, it becomes permanent. Emotions surged through me. Vindication, joy, and a lingering sadness that I'd been forced through a minefield of sabotage to reach this moment. But mostly, I felt proud. Thank you, I said, voice steady. I won't let you down. As I exited his office, the reality sank in. I had just claimed Kenton's job. The same job he insisted I wasn't smart enough for was now in my hands. I smiled to myself, imagining the look on Kenton's face if he ever heard the news. Perhaps it was petty, but the victory felt incredible. On my first official day as acting sales director, I walked into the same office Kenton once occupied. The nameplate on the door had been replaced with a temporary sign bearing my name, Crystal Reed. The desk, the view, the responsibilities, all of it was mine now. I glanced out the window at the bustling city below, remembering how many times I'd questioned my worth, how many nights I'd weighed whether to keep fighting or leave. Amanda appeared in the doorway, a cup of celebratory coffee in hand. "Congrats, boss," she said with a grin, relief and genuine happiness evident in her eyes. No tension, no fear, just a fresh start. "Thank you, Amanda," I replied. "And I mean that. None of this would have been possible without your help." She nodded, stepping aside to let Brandon from IT into the room. He offered a small wave. "Heard the good news. Just wanted to say thanks for not forgetting those who helped along the way." I smiled. "I never will." Sinking into my new chair, I took a deep breath. Kenton's brand of tyranny was finished, and the job he said I'd never be good enough for? Now it was mine. There was so much work to do, rebuilding morale, strengthening processes, and forging a new legacy for this department. But as I logged in to start my day, I couldn't help replaying Kenton's humiliating words in my mind. "You're just not smart enough." Looking around the office, I let that memory fade, replaced by the reality of my new role. I had proven, to everyone, and especially to myself, that I was more than capable. I was the one in charge now. Chapter 12, The Revelation.